So remember, this webinar is about is for Path 3 applicants for our FY25 disaster supplemental grant competition. So this is our industry transformation pathway. So remember, in industry transformation, we're looking for a portfolio of 3 to 5 interconnected construction or non-construction grants. And we estimate that portfolio of grants proposals would be around $20 million, between $20 million and $50 million. Remember, the deadline is coming very quickly, Tuesday, March the 3rd at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Next slide. So this will be on.
Lori, just let me know when we can meet.
So,
Okay,
maybe-
about it.
I need somebody to mute. Thanks. Thank you. This is the last webinar that we will be doing for all applicants. So this webinar is over, like I said, EDGE submission and guidance. Our whole webinar series is posted online at this website, recordings and decks. I strongly encourage you to, if you're joining for the first time, to look at webinars 6 and 7, which we walk through the overarching narrative and provide some advice on how to complete the overarching narrative and questions to ask yourself as you are polishing your applications. But then if you are looking for more sort of general information about all of our pathways, I encourage you to look at webinars 1 through 5. All right, next slide. So today's agenda is we are going to walk you through how to submit your application for Path 3 applications only for EDGE. So EDGE is our database system that we use to intake applications and manage our awards at EDA. We're going to talk about how to set up your application. We're going to have a few budget narrative tips. We'll also tell you about a couple more FAQs that we've updated on our website. And then we'll have some housekeeping notes. If you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. And then I think Amanda will pause a couple times throughout the presentation to open the floor for questions. So without any further delay, I'll go to Amanda Costi, who is extremely valuable on my team and is going to give you really good instructions to submit your application. So Amanda, floor is all yours.
Thanks, Justin. So first, we're going to talk about the summary of the application structure and documentation required. I will say that this is going to be pretty in the weeds in terms of what the forms require and things like that. And it's not too late if you have a finance team to get them on this call or anyone else. But as Justin said, this will be recorded and posted on the website shortly after. As a quick reminder, all of this is in the NOFO. You should use the NOFO as your North Star before you use these slides, and that everything covered here is going to be in the summary table on page 35 of the NOFO. So as we're structuring for the industry transformation path, we're looking at what is required for the whole coalition versus what is required for individual component projects. So this slide shows the coalition-wide documents required. So that is the overarching narrative. This is 10 pages with 8 subsections as laid out in the NOFO. The goal of the narrative is to tell the story of your coalition and all your projects and how they are tied together. The next thing that is considered coalition-wide is our match documentation. So match documentation, you can remember that for the coalition, you can have match calculated at the coalition level. You don't have to have it per project per se. However, you are more than welcome to do that. The match documentation should be submitted with its respective component projects, however. So for example, if you have a match provided by a business and it's tied to a workforce project specifically, we'll want to see that documentation attached specifically to that workforce project. However, we do want to see we want to make sure that you remember that you're allowed to calculate match at the portfolio level. The next thing is the commitment letters or documentation and summary table. So the commitments can either apply to the coalition or a specific component, Regardless, we want you to attach all of your commitment letters together. And a reminder that commitments may be demonstrated with a signed letter, or you can choose to use the ED 900B form instead of a letter. The important thing you need to take away from this slide that is tricky is where to submit these. So there is no coalition-wide or overarching application in Edge. So what you're going to do is all of these documents are still required for your coalition. You just pick one of the component projects, doesn't matter which one, we'll find it and attach all these documents. So we prefer that you keep all these documents together. They should work with any type of application that you upload. Responsible organizations here are the coalition lead. That's their job to write the overarching narrative and make sure all these things are met. And the component lead will need to help partner if it's different from the coalition lead to make sure those documents are uploaded correctly. I do want to note here, since there is no kind of coalition or overarching application in Edge, that your applications will be linked together on the back end via a function in Edge called the association feature. We're going to talk about that later in this presentation. All right, so now moving forward, we're going to talk about the component project documents. So we talked about the coalition-wide, now we're going to talk about specific project documents. For non-construction projects, this is the list of the different forms and items that are required to be submitted per component project. So if you have 5 projects, you'll need to submit all of these documents 5 times per each project. Some of these you'll note are if applicable. If you have questions about whether it applies to your project, you can always reach out to your local EDR who can help you with that. Every non-construction component project application requires this, and the component project lead will need to upload these directly into Edge. We do note that RLFs, revolving loan funds, are considered non-construction projects. However, they do have some additional documentation. So again, make sure you check page 35 tables for the type of project you're submitting here. I want to draw attention to a couple of things here that we see are kind of common issues. The CD 511, the SFLL, these are basically declaring if you've done any lobbying for this program. It's completely okay to put NA on these forms. You do still need to submit them. So when in doubt, it's better to upload a form that says not applicable than to not include the form at all. I'm going to pause here for a minute. I see some questions. Narrative instructions also say the ED 900B can be used instead of a commitment table. Yeah, I'd encourage you, again, the ED 900B can be used instead of commitment letters. The table is something actually in the overarching narrative. So we do want to see that kind of summary table in the overarching narrative. Is there any type of level of commitment that requires the use of the ED 900B instead of the letter? I just saw something about greater than 15 jobs. I will let your EDR help answer that question. It's on, the directions are on the form if you want to use it. But again, we'll accept a commitment letter or the form. You don't have to do both per commitment. You can pick which one you think best fits that type of commitment. The overarching narrative is not submitted separately. It is all submitted with one component projects, and all the commitment letters are attached to just one of the component projects. That is correct, Deborah. What we're looking for to do is, since there is not a spot in Edge to put the overarching, like kind of its own separate overarching application, we're just asking you to attach it to any one of your component projects, and we will find it. And based on the naming, always make sure you name things very clearly so that it's easy to understand the, so it's easy for us to find those documents. Great. I'm going to move on, and I'll come back to the chat later. So next we have component project documents for construction projects. So I'll also note that this covers a lot for design and engineering projects as well. But you'll see that there are quite a number of forms required. Construction projects, we obviously need to see some of your plans. We need to understand land rights, environmental documentation, things like that. So here we'll have some of our standard forms on the left that will look familiar from what we saw on the non-construction slide as well. And on the right side, you'll see kind of the more construction heavy forms here, including the SF424D on assurances, the ED 900C for construction. This also includes a preliminary engineering report. There's a subsection in that report for this. So we want to make sure that you look at that and you understand that that is included in that ED 900C. If you're doing a design and engineering application and not a construction application, you would need the ED 900D instead of the ED 900C, and so forth. So again, every construction component project application needs to submit the full list of forms and documentation, and that will be uploaded directly by the component project lead. Great. I'm coming back to the chat for a second. David noted that in one of our previous webinars, there was a tip that said the overarching application is separate from each component project. David, we apologize. We did some digging on the back end of Edge and realized that that was not how it was set up, and we can't go back and change it. So the guidance giving today is accurate to how that should be uploaded. And we're going to do some screenshots in a minute, so you'll see what I'm talking about. All right. And now we get into the Edge part, everybody's favorite topic. So in Edge, I'm going to start with a couple of quick definitions. Edge has a little bit of its own language. A lot of it aligns with how it's named in the NOFO, but some of it might sound a little different from what's in the NOFO. So I wanted to clarify what these different things mean. So in Edge, if you see the word association, that means coalition. If you see the word funding request, that is a component project application. If you see a coalition lead in Edge, we'll call it the lead if we call it a coalition lead, the NOFO calls it the lead coalition member organization. Same thing for a component lead. This is the component project lead organization / also known as the lead applicant. And an authorized representative. This is a signatory authority from the component lead. This is very important that you know what an authorized representative is, because it's going to come up on pretty much every slide. And again, remember, all materials must be submitted in Edge by 5 p.m. on Tuesday, March 3rd, 2026. Materials received after this timestamp will not be considered in the competition. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to want to make sure that you are in the correct NOFO. Again, this webinar is focused only for industry transformation path. For anyone who's applying for other NOFOs, this Edge setup will not apply to those. This is only for industry transformation. Okay, this slide is for the coalition leads. If you are a coalition lead, the first thing you want to do is you want to go in and you want to create an association. This is pulling together your coalition. So what this does is on the back end, this is how we link all of your projects together. So the coalition lead should go into Edge. They should set up an association. Make sure it'll give you an option for consortium or coalition. You're going to want to make sure that you click coalition. This is how we'll be able to identify all our projects. What you'll do in setting up your association is add in all of your component lead organizations and basically make a little group. And that's all you need to do. So once you do that, you'll name your association. You can name it anything you want. This is not a marketing activity. This is a back-end data activity. Make sure to let your component leads know what your association's called so that they can start their application and make sure that they are part of it. If you've already started an application, make sure that, and you're not sure if you're associated with an association, feel free to email the help desk and we can make sure that your application gets sorted correctly. So that was for the coalition leads. Now moving forward for the rest of the EDGE slides, we're going to focus on component leads. So if you are a component lead, you are going to start your funding request by clicking apply now in the NOFO on EDGE. Once you're in, you're going to select the type of project you'll be submitting. This is it construction? Is it non-construction? Is it design and engineering? Is it a revolving loan fund? So you'll pick your project type. You'll pick a project title. I do want to note that this project title cannot be easily changed. It requires you to email the help desk and they have to do it on the back end. So make sure you do that. A tip we have here is you may want to include your coalition's name in your project title for ease of navigation. The next thing you're going to do, you've now started your funding request. The first thing I would encourage you to do is set up your team. Just by clicking on the top there's a button, this is the application team. You as the person who started will automatically default to the lead applicant role. That's great. The next thing I would do is make sure you add an authorized representative. This is also a great way that if you want your coalition lead to have visibility into your project, or if you have any outside consultants or anyone that you would like to have access to help out with building your application, you can add them here. There's not a limit on how many people can be there. You just need to make sure you understand the roles in which people are assigned, because there are some limitations in what certain people can do depending on their role assignment. If you're inviting an outside organization, somebody that's not from your organization, you will need that organization's tax identification number or UEI number. Know your role. On your application team, this is super, super important. Every competition we've ever had, somebody is freaking out at the 5 minutes before the deadline because they can't submit their application. And 99.9% of the time, it's not a bug in the system. It's because the person trying to submit it is not the authorized representative. Only the authorized representative can submit the funding request. So it's a very, very, very important that you know who is your authorized representative and that they know that this is their responsibility. The next thing you're going to do now that you've set up your team is move to your SF424. This is the first form. Some of the other sections will not unlock or let you edit them until you fill this one out first. So do take a minute, fill out this form. You can always come back and change it before you submit it, but I would go through and fill this out as comprehensively as possible. You'll see in the screenshot here that some of the boxes are grayed out. That information will auto-populate from your organization's profile on EDGE. So if there's incorrect information in there, your organization probably is listed slightly differently. So you can email the help desk and we can try to sort through that. But a lot of it will be auto-populated based on other information you've already entered in EDGE. All right, so this is our EDGE tips and reminders. The first one is in EDGE. Here's some kind of wonky things that we just want you to be ready for. So when you go to upload a file, it will only allow you to upload one file per section. What you need to do is if there are multiple files that you need to upload, such as a commitment letter, please upload a zip file. Or you can combine all the files into a single PDF, but it will also accept zip files. So I would encourage you to create a zip file and upload that to EDGE if there's more than one document you need to upload per section. Second, where to upload. If you don't know where to upload something, putting it in other is fine. On the back end, we see it all kind of together in a giant folder anyway. So there's no problem if you upload something in that other folder. Again, make sure your naming of your files is super clear so we can identify what document that is. So if it's a commitment letter, put that. If it's a match letter, put that. File size. EDGE doesn't like files over 25 megabytes. If you need to upload a file bigger than 25 megabytes, particularly we know some of the renderings and things for construction projects often exceed that, you can email the help desk and they can help you upload that on their end. 4, file names. Pick clear and obvious file names to help the reviewers navigate your folder. Final submitter, I've said this, but I can't articulate it enough. Only the authorized representative in Edge can submit the application. So know who your authorized representative is. Password reset. If you need a password reset on Edge account, I'd recommend emailing the help desk directly instead of using the forgot password link. Sometimes there's issues with cookies and caching on your computer that causes issues. So it's easier to just email the help desk. And finally, the Edge help desk. IT issues are solvable. So we have a team that is great and very responsive and very good at finding quick solutions. So when in doubt, feel free to email them for IT related issues. If you have questions on forms and things like that, that should go directly to your EDR. But if you have issues accessing Edge, they should be able to help you. All right, let's pause here and then look at some of the questions. Match question. If an eligible organization is providing match, they can also be a contractor or a sub-recipient. That is correct, JC. As long as the only rule about rule about match is, if they're providing match, they cannot be a contractor. That's the rule. If you're a contractor, they can be either receive federal fund or provide match, but they cannot be both. If they are a eligible entity and they would like to be a subrecipient, they can receive both federal share and provide match. Same thing applies to co-applicants. The rule there is that a contractor cannot provide match and receive federal share. It has to be one or the other. Can a private sector company be a contractor? Yes, they would have to follow procurement rules to procure that contract. Next question. If you've entered an incorrect title and that's all you've done, you can just delete the application and start over. Sure, that works. Lynn has a question about a consortium, not a coalition. Is there a way for you to change that? I would email the help desk. I don't know if there's something you can do on your end, but I'm sure we could do something on the back end to update that to say coalition instead. What if the lead applicant is the authorized representative? Do I need to abundantly add them as the authorized rep? Yes, you can have multiple hats in Edge. So you can be both the lead applicant and the authorized representative. So you would just add yourself again and assign yourself twice. Is the SF424 form the same for all parties? Brendan, I'm not sure if I understand your question. The SF424, it should be specific to your organization and your project is how it should be filled out. Like I said, it's auto-populated with the organization. Whoever started the application, their organization is assumed to be the lead applicant. So it would auto-populate with that person's organization's information. I don't think I answered your question, Brendan. Do you want to kind of come off mute?
Yes, I believe you answered it. It was just auto-populating in the Edge portal, and we're trying to figure out if we needed to delete it and override with our information.
Okay, great. Kayleen asked, my org is a coalition lead and helping each project lead with their project applications. What role should we be assigned? That's great. So great question, Kayleen. You would want to be assigned as team member. That is the official title. We do want the component lead to be the authorized representative and the lead applicant. The reason is the authorized representative is somebody who has signatory authority for that organization. And by submitting the application, we consider that the same as a wet signature, which is why the role assignment is very important. For the SF 424, does the coalition lead submit one for the entire coalition as well, or one for their own component project? Just for the component projects. The 424 does not apply to the overarching. It's just for the component projects. All right. Next, we're moving on to budget narrative tips. So, first and foremost, although this is a kind of silly looking slide, I will say it's the most important slide. I will say the first thing I would say, if you take away two things from this today, one is make sure you know who your authorized rep is. And the second one is this slide here, which is please, please, please double check your totals. There's a lot of budget information that we're asking for in these applications. And if we can't make sense of it, it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard for reviewers. So we want to make sure that everything makes sense. So when we think about the budget, there's a few different forms. There's the SF 424A for non-construction projects and the SF 424C for construction projects. Those are high-level overview budget forms that give us kind of the summary of the budget. There's the budget narrative where we're asking for very detailed, we want detailed breakdowns of where the money would go that we would invest. The next one is match documentation. So if whoever is providing match for your project, we need to make sure that match documentation is covered. And then the 424 is more general information, but it does have an overarching budget where it just asks for your top line federal requests and match requests. So we do want to make sure that that is all very clear. You'll note that you don't see commitment letters on this page, and that's because commitments are not considered part of your budget. We had a webinar about that last week that my colleague Grace led, so you can rewatch that one to learn more about commitments. When we post these slides, there will be links here, but we will be posting templates that are optional, but we encourage you to use them for both non-construction and construction projects to help you kind of sort through your budget narrative piece. So I just said this, but reminder, commitments are not the same as match. This is a slide from last week's webinar. Again, I encourage you to go watch that or look at that slide deck again for more information, but just wanted to highlight that again here, that there's a distinction between the two. Match should be in the budget, commitment is outside of the budget. Match tracking. So I hinted at this earlier, want to spell it out a little bit more clearly here, which is that for the industry transformation path, we do allow portfolio-wide match tracking. So that means if across the coalition, there's a request of $38.4 million of federal share, that means in order to reach the 20%, that we would need to have $9.6 million in match. That can look like a number of things. That could be all your match on one project. That could be match spread evenly across all your projects. That could be match being on 2 of your 4 projects. However you want to structure it, the point is that we are doing the math at the portfolio level. So if you have a project with 0% match and you're making up for it in another project, no problem. Just make sure you're checking your math across your whole portfolio. Here's some quick tips on match letters. We do want the match letters to be detailed. We want exact dollar amounts because, again, we're trying to do the math that's on the left side of the screen. So we'd like to see the details of the math. Reminder that program income is not an allowable match source. Make sure your letter amounts match the activity descriptions within the budget narratives. So we should be able to track your budget narrative match to your match letter. Provide itemized and valuation details for each non-cash in-kind contribution, and make sure that those letters are signed by an authorized representative from that entity that's providing match. And letters should include a statement that the funds being provided as match are unencumbered, unrestricted, and committed to the project. Some match letter don'ts that we often see. You cannot use other federal funding as match without confirming the eligibility from EDA prior to submission. So if you have another grant from another federal agency, you likely cannot do that for use that as match. If you have a question, there might be some few statutes that might allow it. Please check with your EDR. Don't combine multiple entities match within one letter. It's okay to have separate letters from the same match source if funds will be applied across multiple projects. If you have one letter, you can attach it to multiple projects. We just want to make sure, again, that we understand that this dollar amount is going to this project for this purpose. And a reminder again, to answer JC's earlier question, contractors cannot provide match and receive federal share. Budget narrative for non-construction. So again, this reflects both your federal request and your match at the project level expenses. Here's just a couple of the things that we're looking for. This aligns with the 424A. Some quick tips here. Personnel and fringe costs should correspond with the staffing plan totals. Travel should only be for staff that are listed in the staffing plan. We do want, some detailed costs there. How many trips are you taking? Where are you going? Equipment. Equipment is defined as a tangible personal property with a 1+ year useful life and costs more than $10,000 per unit. A lot of people often conflate equipment and supplies. So that's our definition of what goes in equipment. Remember that all contracts are subject to federal procurement requirements. And subawards, don't submit a separate budget. It should all be included in the main budget. Indirect costs, if you have a NECRA, you can include that here. If you do not have a NECRA, you can use the de minimis rate of 15% for indirect costs. But if you are using a NECRA or a rate higher than 15%, you must submit your documentation as well. Oops, sorry. Staffing plan is part of the budget narrative. Again, key personnel is anyone in the component league org whose time will be paid by the project. Don't forget to account for cost of living adjustments if these are longer term projects. Make sure we understand the percent of time dedicated to the project. So are they full-time? Are they part-time? We want to see the annual breakdown by year, and don't forget about those fringe costs. One of our tips here is to list staff by title or functional area instead of by name. This reduces post-award amendments if funded. So instead of saying, Director Justin Tooley, I would say, Director and a description of what that function is. Next is subaward. Like I said, subaward budgets should be included. Make sure each subaward requires its own small budget and staffing plan, but those should all be kind of attached together. Budget narrative for construction. So again, there's 3 required budget documents for this. The budget narrative, which will have the more detailed breakdown, the SF424C, and then the ED900C / including the preliminary engineering report. Make sure they're clear and comprehensive. They should justify why each budget line is necessary and supports the component project, and details cost estimates in terms of quantities, use-it prices, and total costs. Construction budget narratives do not require a staffing plan, so they are different. And I'm gonna, again, we'll post these. We have some links here to the preliminary engineering report. This is attached as part of the ED900C. So you will not see like a separate upload section edge for that. You should attach it with the ED900C. An environmental narrative template, and then an example, which is also linked in the NOFO. And then we have an example here of an environmental narrative that we can share. So final tips and reminders. 1, NA, not applicable, is an acceptable answer to some of the forms, particularly those lobbying forms. 2, commitments require a letter or the ED900B per commitment. You don't have to submit both for each commitment. You can choose which one makes the most sense for that commitment. 3, you've heard me say it 100 times today, check your math and then check it again. I will say this is the biggest mistake I think we see on applications. For one of our tips is in working with coalitions and these kind of big projects, it's helpful to have someone outside of your organization read your application for clarity and ask them to pitch it back to you. If they're not understanding what you're saying, the reviewers might not either. 5, don't wait until 30 minutes before the deadline to start your application in Edge. As we've talked about, there's some tips and tricks to Edge, like with any IT system. So don't get caught up, you know, in a crunch in the last 5 minutes, because applications submitted late will not be considered. And finally, don't forget to celebrate your accomplishments. Coalition building is really hard work, so don't forget to reward yourself and your team. Final housekeeping. Again, as Justin said at the beginning of this webinar, all of the disaster webinar series is published. We will not be having any. This will be the final webinar that we're posting on the website moving forward, but please go back and reference all the materials there. We're going to link some additional Edge resources in this PowerPoint here, including tutorial videos on how to submit the application, walking you through how to fill out a funding request, how to create an association, some written resources on assigning team roles, adding third parties, so any outside organizations. And if you don't have it bookmarked, please bookmark the Edge Help Desk. Our IT support team is awesome. That's granthd@eda.gov. And also I'll remind you at the top of, in this kind of arrow on the right side of the screen, there is, when you go to the homepage for Edge, there is a resources link at the very top that has other documents and training materials. These are just a few that we pulled out that were very specific to this presentation. And a reminder, you're not alone. You know, don't forget to read the NOFO. The NOFO is the North Star. Also, on grants.gov in the related documents section, when you click on the link, there are copies of the forms as well. So there's PDFs of all the forms required as well. Don't forget to read the FAQs. We're actually updating a couple more today based on some of the conversations we had last week. Don't forget to review the webinars, and of course, always engage your local economic development representative with questions. Thank you. I'm going to stop sharing and look at the chat. All
Amanda,
right.
I'm trying to back you up on some things in here. I gave a really long definition of programming from the regulations. I put the FAQ about period of performance and non-construction projects. You see anything? Should coordination? I
Okay.
can answer a
So
couple of these.
I think Morgan's question, I don't think I've answered yet. It looks like the narrative is listed as required on the applications. Does the component upload that while the remaining components leave that section blank? Will this system allow us to submit even though it's listed as required? Yeah, you can always, so like I said, since you can attach the overarching narrative to any project, it is listed in all of the projects. If it is listed as required, you can always, if there's something like that that is structured that way, you can always list it as an option to, like, you can upload a document or something that says, a blank piece of paper that says, you know, see other project or something like that as well. But you only have to upload it once.
So Amanda, can you speak to this element about the overarching narrative would not require anything overall, and instead, like, I think that's a complete misreading of what we're trying to say.
Yeah, so the overarching narrative, and are you talking about the structure of it?
Yeah.
Okay, So you can, so what it is again, the overarching narrative's goal is to provide us this overview into how you guys are operating as a coalition. How are these projects going to prove that your community will bounce back from your disaster, and your industry will transform stronger as a coalition? That being said, in terms of how we submit that, because when you log in, when you go to create a funding request, there is not an option that says overarching. So there is not a separate overarching application. I know in our past webinar, we were not fully aware that that was it. We will probably go back and update those slides to reflect that we didn't realize that that button was not there. Until a couple days ago. So that is our apologies for any mixed messaging there. But what we're asking you to do is just pick a component project and upload the overarching coalition-wide documents to any one of your component projects. It doesn't matter which one. We'll find it and we will consider those as your overarching documentation for the coalition. So that includes you do not need to have an overarching SF 424. It is just the overarching narrative, your commitment letters, and then we will be calculating, like when we go to check all of your individual component projects match, we will run the numbers at the coalition level to make sure that match is covered for your coalition, you meet your requirements. However, those match letters should be attached to the respective component project. So if I have, project A, B, and C, but only projects A and B have match attached to them, I want those respective match letters attached to projects A and B, and project C would not have any match letters. But when I do the math, I'm going to include project C in the math. Did that kind of clarify it? I'm going to jump down to this question. How long does it take to process new team members in Edge? How early should we get them going up, get them in there? The answer is that it could take a day or two. I think it's great to start your application earlier rather than later, just to be safe. You don't want to be trying to figure this out the week it's due. And all of a sudden, we can't get somebody's password reset for some reason. But normally people are added into Edge within a day or two. Like I said, our help desk is very useful, very helpful, and very good about turning things around quickly. How somebody asked about the association feature in Edge. How will it link all your applications together? So again, the association feature, you're not going to see much of that on your end. We see it on the back end. And what that looks like for us is, I think of it as like a hashtag. It's basically a tag that we put on each application. So when we read it, it will say, this belongs to this coalition. So it's not anything formal. It's not going to look any different. You're probably not even going to see it on your end. But when we download the applications on the back end, it will essentially have kind of a tag on it that says this application belongs to this coalition, and that's how we'll see it. The other thing you can do is just make sure that we're able to do that analysis. So really don't lose sleep over that part. But if helpful, you can always put your coalition name in your project title. That's another way to help make sure that we put all your things together. If a partner's match applied to multiple component projects, do we attach the same letter in both places? Yep, that works.
Amanda, I don't know. I don't think this functionality exists. So Noah's question here, can we export all the imports to review and approve in a comprehensive document before we hit the final submit button? I don't think that functionality is there, but do you have any it sounds like, Noah, you're trying to make sure that everybody else is in your component project has that they've submitted everything. Edge doesn't have that functionality, but it's really important that you communicate across your coalition, use the NOFO documentation tables as like a checklist and like visualize those things. I mean, it could be as easy as like if I were managing this, I would just like hop on a Teams and like share a screen and be like, okay, it's there. But that functionality doesn't exist to like centralize all of the component products that are associated with your overarching application. Sorry.
Yep. Okay, long question. Both partner with a match and partners without a match fill out letters of commitment. Oh, correct. The partners without a match just disregard the letters first paragraph prompt. So only, sorry, the ED, this is a great question. Thank you for flagging that again, Jennifer. The ED 900B is for commitments, not for match. So like these are two different things. We have match and we have commitments. I'm actually going to pull open the slides again and go back to that just because I think this is really important that we clarify this. So give me 1 second to pull back up my slides. Great. So commitments are not the same as match. Match has to fund eligible activities under the NOFO. It is directly tied to EDA funded projects. It is considered in the scope of work. It is monitored by EDA. And there's no limit on the number of letters, and this is required and will be monitored by EDA. Commitments are things outside of match. Are outside of the direct scope of work, but these are activities that further the coalition's goals. These are activities that support the projects being proposed and support the coalition. So we kind of think of these as like outside leverage funds. So in doing that, what the requirement is for commitments, you would need to submit either a letter explaining what the commitment is. So that could say, hey, this organization's going to fund, $500,000 in scholarships. Outside of this, our workforce project is like going to continue to do this thing, continue to do its work, but like we're getting this outside funding that's not directly tied to it, but is like going to support the industry overall. That might be a commitment, or a commitment to hire. An employer says, I'm going to hire 100 people from that come out of this. That's kind of what we consider a policy commitment. But match is part of the scope of work. It's part of your budget narrative. It's part of the project. It's needed to like finish the project essentially. So only commitment letters require the ED 900B. It could be a letter or the form. Match, we have to have match letters. So yeah, hopefully that answered your question, Jennifer. All right. Are there other questions we haven't answered? You can do what Jennifer did and maybe re-up it in the chat, or if somebody wants to come off mute. We have a couple more minutes. We could take a couple more questions.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So I think you said in the staffing plan that only staff members who are members of the lead organization should be listed there. But maybe I misunderstood, and I'm thinking about, for example, if a staff person who, if a person is part of is the coalition lead, but not employed by any of the component lead organizations, but is spending time and maybe needs some reimbursement, how would that be handled? Would that be attached to any one of the budgets or a bit by bit across all the budgets, or it's not allowable?
Oops. Sorry, can you hear me? My computer froze for a second.
Yes,
Are you good?
I can hear you.
Okay, sorry.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah. So really what the budget is, it's key personnel. So I think in this example of a coalition lead, that would be fine to put on the staffing plan. The other place we often is because this person is still kind of critical to it. What we don't want to see is like if there are formal subrecipient agreements, we don't want to see that in the key personnel. That should be in the subrecipient call out. Sometimes people hire consultants or contractors, so people who are 1099 who are going to come in and do things, that should be under the contractual line item, for that. So I think in that specific example, that would be fine. The other thing I will say is, obviously do your best if awarded. This is the kind of nuanced detail, like don't lose sleep over that piece of it. This is the kind of nuanced detail we can iron out if awarded, of moving things around, but we just want to make sure that your numbers are all accounted for and that we really understand the feasibility of your project. So making sure that those key players who are going to be working directly in the project are highlighted in the budget.
Thank you.
Yeah. JC.
Yes. Hi, Amanda. My question is that one of our member providing matching plus commitment, but they are not asking for federal funding. However, does that mean that this disqualify this member for bidding a contract later?
If it's match, yes. They can be a contractor can receive federal share, or they can provide matching share. They cannot do both. So what we're trying to avoid here, JC, is the basically this pay to play concept, which could be seen as unethical. So that's what we're trying to avoid here with the contractor rule about match. So they're providing commitment outside of the project. They could still be considered. They could likely still be considered for a potential contract. Again, all contracts must be procured through the federal guidance on the rules to make sure we have the right amount of bids and all that kind of thing for the correct threshold. But they would, if they were providing match, they could not receive federal share, or they would not be eligible to receive federal share. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks.
Hi, and I'm going to come back and ask about the match letter. Sorry, I've just checked the NOFO. I'm concerned because we put matches in our letter of commitment, and I don't see any template for a match letter or any instructions until this minute that they're separate. I mean, it could be my failing, certainly, but I'm way concerned.
Yeah. So what in this situation, if you have both commitments and match, what we would need is I hope the letters have very clear definitions of what is being used as match and what is being used as commitment. In that case, I would just upload the letters like multiple times. So making sure that match is, if they're combined in one letter, I would upload that letter a couple of times, but I would make sure that you have it very, very clear on what is going to match and what is going to commitment.
Okay, I'll take that. Your letter template was very specific, so we have instructed people to be very specific. So I'm hopeful. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jennifer. Daniel?
Yeah, thanks. If we have certain reports, like economic reports that we want to reference, we include those as attachments, or are we just only limited to extract the relevant data into the narrative itself?
I would reference them. I think that's the kind of thing. And sorry, Daniel, I'm gonna ask you to mute because there's a lot of background noise behind you.
Oh, sure.
Sorry. I would ask you to Grace just actually put a FAQ in the chat. So you're not required to cite your references. However, footnotes or hyperlink text would be really helpful. If you would include an appendix, it must fit within the page limit. So the thing I will say is, we only, for fairness for the competition, since we do have page limits on things, that in scoring, we only consider what is submitted within the context of the page limit. So if somebody submits a extra long project narrative, which we see, we'll only read the first 10 pages or whatever the limitation is in the NOFO. So we would encourage you to kind of use footnotes if possible. Great. We have 1 more minute left. Any last second question? All right. Well, thank you all for your time. And we look forward to seeing your applications on March 3rd.